Committee. It is Wednesday, September 3rd at 11 a.m. And I don't know if there's a need to call the roll because it's just me, right? So I'm here, Cameron Perez-Verdia.
I'm here on the phone.
Oh, you are? Oh, great. Chris Constant is here on the phone. Anybody else on the phone?
Mr. Chair, it's
Felix Rivera.
Great. Felix Rivera and Jared Gecker on the phone also.
Jared Gecker. Yep.
Okay. Great. All right. All right. So we've got a full meeting today, and we're going to start with the mayor's office. Go ahead and share your name for the record, and you can go ahead and start. Oh yeah, that's true. APD is going to start us off. Chelsea Inn.
Not from the mayor's office, but Chelsea Inn update. Sean Case for the record, Anchorage Police Department. So Chelsea Inn on the 22nd, that was a joint operation between the Anchorage Police Department and the FBI. It's an FBI case with one of our task force officers assigned to the FBI that is working that case and has been for the last several years. So the current status of the Chelsea Inn is it has been boarded up, fenced up, cameras in the lot. That is courtesy of the United States Marshals Service in their process. That's who does that. And it will remain that way until it goes through the federal process for the federal government to take ownership of that property. And to date, there's no solid plan on what they're going to do when they get control of that property, when it's fully seized and belongs to them. But that process, we're working on kind of a year timeline. We're looking, it's probably going to be about a year before that process is complete. It's a little bit timely with the feds.
Thanks. And by the way, if members have questions, please feel free to text me. Just a couple, you said there was cameras?
Yes, the U.S. Marshals put cameras on the property so that if people climb the fence or cut the fence or try to break into the property, that there's camera footage. So it's all focusing in on the property itself.
And are they the ones that are managing that? In terms of the response to the cameras? How does that work? If they've seized it, they're in complete control?
Yep, those are their cameras, their feeds, and they're not live monitoring it. That's just for if there is damage or trespass, they'll collect the data and the footage of that, and then more than likely hand it over to us to do the enforcement piece of it.
Okay. And just, can you talk to us a little bit about the surrounding area as well? I know that there was, I think there was other properties in the area that were addressed as well, trap houses or other, what's happening with the surrounding area generally in terms of patrol and the sort of I don't know if the word is splash of folks that are not there anymore. And what does it look like in the surrounding area?
So we've started to work on some residences that have been flagged by complaints coming into the police department in terms of using, selling, distributing drugs. Most of it is drug activity that's being reported. And so we're working on those houses right now and continuing to have a higher level of presence and enforcement in and around the area. I think the hotel in and of itself being gone has caused a pretty drastic decrease in everything, foot traffic, crime, drugs, but not certainly where it would be at a level that I think we're all happy with. And so that's going to continue to be a project for the next several months to continue to kind of the cleanup effort. And I think that generally when you have a boarded up property, even though it's boarded and there's a fence, it still can be a magnet. You know, anytime you have a property that doesn't look great and not appealing, it tends to attract various types of criminal behavior. So we'll be in and around that area throughout the next year and just trying to make sure it's not a magnet to criminal activity.
Great, thanks. And we've been joined by Ms. Silvers and Ms. Baldwin-Day. Just one other question. You said is there an intention to put a fence around it?
Fence should already be up.
Oh,
fence and camera should already be up.
Great. Okay. Any other questions on the Chelsea? I don't see anybody from any members. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'm plugged in. Good morning. Thea Agnew-Benben, one of the special assistants to Mayor LaFrance. We wanted to, as a kind of transition between what Chief Case just shared about the Chelsea Inn and before talking about APD's new pre-arrest diversion program, we wanted to give just a little bit of an overview of where we're at in terms of the level of substance use in the community and how the Muni is responding to that. We had a good conversation with the two co-chairs of this committee to just start really thinking about how do we get our arms around this. So just a reminder that we do have a public safety strategy that the mayor has put forward. Our 4 main goals are that we build up our public safety workforce, we have less crime and more accountability, we have more people accessing crisis care, and that our public places are safe, both in emergencies and every day. One of the things that I think the chief referred to in terms of the Chelsea, and I think people probably read in the paper, is a lot of fentanyl that was seized at that property. Also, there was another big seizure earlier in the year when we had the joint operation. And even though those seizures are really significant, I think they're just in some ways the tip of the iceberg. This data is from the fire department. The top line is incidents where the public administered Narcan, which is a medication we can administer to reverse an overdose. So between 2020 and 2024, we went from administering it 50 times in a year to almost 450 times. In the same period, AFD, who's often called when there is an overdose, even if somebody's already administered Narcan, they went from transporting, basically the amount of transports that they had doubled in the last 4 years. So I think that's just a kind of sentinel data measure to show the extent of the opioid epidemic here in Anchorage. You may also have read that last year, most states in the country saw a decrease in overdose rates. Alaska has not seen a decrease yet. And Anchorage has about half of the overdoses for the state. So this is still a big issue for us. This is just looking at the total calls that we get every month at APD Dispatch. And then over a period from 2022 to 2024, what portion of those calls do we consider mental health calls? So we get around, around 20,000 calls a month. I'm using the right zeros there. And about around 200 of those are mental health calls. So it's around kind of 10%. And just keep in mind that when we say mental health, we're not necessarily looking across the whole spectrum of behavioral health. So we're not necessarily including substance use when we see those. But this is a really great chart. I think going back from 2022, so this is the same period as what you saw before. In the black boxes, those are the calls that MIT, or Mobile Intervention Team, is able to respond to. And in the blue bars, those are our other resources, so mostly APD Patrol. And I think what you're seeing there is over the period of time that we've really been expanding the Mobile Intervention Team, they have been able to both absorb kind of higher total amount of calls, but then keeping the number of calls that Patrol is responding to either at the same level or decreasing. So I think what this chart shows us is that when we invest in Mobile Intervention Team, we're both getting better results for people who are in a mental health crisis, but we also are seeing the number of calls that Patrol responds to in that category go down, which is part of our goal. When we look across all of our other mobile teams, so that includes the Safety Patrol, the Mobile Intervention Team at APD, and also the Mobile Crisis Team at AFD, we're seeing them respond to, kind of between 1,700 and 2,000 calls a month. This is over 2024. And by far, the greatest number of responses is with the Anchorage Safety Patrol. So that's about, in December, that was about 1,200 of the 1,900 calls. And they're responding to a whole range of different types of crises, from other types of mental health crises, as well as people who are intoxicated or incapacitated by substance use. When we think about like how we're responding, I think this is a great chart that shows that our prosecution is back. These are the number of speedy trial dismissals that we've seen from October 2024 to July 2025. And you can see that we're down to very few at this point. So that's great news in terms of holding people accountable when they're committing crimes. Again, how the community is responding. Sometimes I hear people say, well, what's the point of doing diversion to treatment? There is no treatment. Or, how are people supposed to get help? There's no treatment available. I think that's really old news. I think the new news is that we have some really great newer providers that are adding beds. So I did some calls to prepare for this meeting today, and True North Recovery is expanding in the Valley. They're adding both residential beds, detox beds, and what they call day one services, which is when you can just kind of step right into treatment from the street. We also have the Anchorage Recovery Center here in Anchorage. They're also adding spaces in their intensive outreach program. They're going to be adding some more residential beds. They're doing a lot of recovery housing. And then we also have some longtime providers who we've been talking to who actually are not full. So Salvation Army right now has space available in their treatment beds. So we're partly also helping them figure out how to get people into those empty beds. We also have some new providers coming to Anchorage. You might have heard of Amend, who wants to purchase a building in downtown and do residential treatment there. And then we also are doing, I think, a much better job when we're doing outreach, whether it's people who are just in public places or people who are experiencing homelessness, connecting them to treatment. We're doing that every day. And then here at the Muni, we're also going to be retooling the Golden Lion and getting our micro units up and running for recovery residences. So I think both access, connection to, and the capacity to provide treatment is really growing. Over the summer, we really focused on mobile outreach, doing much more assertive outreach to people in public places. That's been a real success, and we're going to be coming back to you with some ideas about how we can carry that forward. And then two of our projects that we'll be working on, as we get into the fall here, you're going to hear from Chief Case and Steve about pre-arrest diversion to treatment. And then with the fire department, we're looking at a number of different ways that we can increase access to medication for people who are in active addiction. And that really helps people reduce their withdrawal and then helps them get into treatment. So we're working with both AFD and some of our community providers to figure out how we can do that, as well as working with the health department that's already doing some mobile outreach and can add to that. So that's just a quick overview of some of the both kind of data that we have and how we're responding. And that was kind of segue into APD's presentation, but happy if there's questions to take now.
Yeah, I have a couple of just real quick questions, and I think as we had talked about in our pre-meeting, I think this is a topic we'll be exploring more into the future. And as we're looking at the sort of categories of access to treatment, outreach, diversion, these kinds of things. The other piece that's in my mind is enforcement and what tools we have for enforcement. And based on our conversation, it sounds like that's an important conversation to have as well. And in terms of our ability to actually do enforcement. So I'm looking forward to more of those conversations and then to dig more into it. And I just would like to say that part of our conversation was around that so many of the issues in public safety and in a lot of the other issues that we've been focusing on that drugs seem to be at the center of a lot of those. And so that's something I'd like to focus our energy on over the next few months. So, okay, great. Seeing no other questions, let's move on to our next item, overview of pre-arrest diversion program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, can I ask a
Sorry.
question?
I didn't see you in the queue. Thanks. Ms. Baldwin-Day. Yes, you have a question?
Yes, please. Ms. Agnew-Bendon, would you repeat the names of the newer providers that are adding beds?
Yeah, through the chair. So I talked with True North Recovery. They actually provide services in Wasilla, Fairbanks, Ketchikan, and then their mobile team comes here to Anchorage, and they're looking to expand here, but also adding capacity in the Valley. And then Anchorage Recovery Center is located in Anchorage, just off of like Boniface and the Glen Highway. And then Emend, it's spelled E-M-E-N-D. They're a new company from the lower 48 that are looking to purchase a property in downtown to do residential treatment there. I think those are the ones that I mentioned.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Baldwin Day's question, I think is a good segue to what I've been thinking, which is, I think this is a ripe opportunity for the administration to do some really good external communications. Because although you said that there's a certain conversation that's old and this is the new conversation, that's not where the community is at. The community is still in the old conversation. So, and I think that means that we have some work to do to make sure that the community is brought with us in terms of our treatment capacity, what that looks like. And I think similar to the great comms that the administration did regarding homelessness and I think turning the tide on homelessness, I think there's an opportunity to tell a compelling story with regard to treatment. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Let's proceed.
So I want to start by, throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the current system and then how diversion plays in our current system, because I think we're at least somewhat familiar with the current criminal justice process and system. And then there's also, with some fear and concern, if we venture outside of the current system into diversion, that there's going to be either unintended consequences or there's going to be a reduction of effective response. So to start off, I think it's important that we all just understand there's two kind of theories that we have with our current criminal justice system. One of them is we believe in the theory of deterrence, just generally speaking, which really dates back to like the late 18th century, and on three concepts, which is swift, certain, and proportionate, right? The theory is if we have swift, certain, and proportion, back then they used the word punishment, we use different words now, that it would deter people from committing crime. And then the second piece of it is our criminal justice system is based on due process, which is a fairness element and peace. So that's kind of background of just kind of where our current system sits as we move forward. When we talk about diversion, our definition is creating opportunities outside the criminal justice system to change behavior. And it's nowhere in here is anything specific. There's not behavioral health in here. There's not a homeless population in here. It's not limited to any of those things. It's all about creating an opportunity where opportunity doesn't exist. And it is lack of opportunity that leads to reoccurring arrest within the criminal justice system. And I put this quote up just so it also reminds us that when we're thinking about our response to either certain populations, certain locations, medical concerns, behavioral health concerns, that it shouldn't be fear and anger that motivate us. We should always come back to like, what are we trying to do? And what's the underlying theory that we're using? And again, the underlying theory, which it's red highlighted in every slide that it's up here, is the word opportunity. So when we think about what diversion looks like in the future in Anchorage, I first want to start with, and for those on the line, I'm looking at the left side of the slide that says lack of opportunity increases reoccurring arrests. And we see opportunity, desire, and skill. And for people to be successful, they generally have to have some element of all of these sorts of things. So I would like to play in the NFL. Unfortunately, I don't have the skill level, never have, and never will to do that. And so for people to be successful, they have to have one of all of these things. And we highlight opportunity because when we're talking about reoccurring arrests, recidivism rates, we know that there are areas of not only Anchorage, but it's been shown throughout the country that follow the law of crime concentration, which says that 50% of our crime occurs in 5% of locations. And that remains consistent over time. So the easy answer to this and the law enforcement answer to this equation, if you will, over the course of time is if we know that it's consistent, then a very small neighborhoods, if you will, is such a high concentration of crime. We put more cops doing more enforcements, and clearly we're going to impact that. But it's not the case. And we know that's not the case because we've done that historically for decades around the country, to include Anchorage. But yet those locations remain constant over time. And one of the reasons why they remain constant is some of those neighborhoods suffer from, again, for those on the phone, the upper right-hand corner of that slide, these elements that are in the diagram. And not to say that this is a cause of the arrest and the crime, but it's a cause of lack of opportunity. And so when we talk about pre-arrest diversion, yes, we want to get people into treatment. Yes, we want to have mental health, behavioral health responses, but we also want to create a connection at a neighborhood level to opportunities on these low-level crimes that may not require going into behavioral health treatment. So I'm going to pick on Celeste in the Alaska Black Caucus because she's sitting here today. So think about community resources like the Alaska Black Caucus, where we could have a misdemeanor arrest, and we could go to the Alaska Black Caucus and say, hey, I've arrested this particular individual, and we believe, based on your mission and your impact in the community, you have something to offer this person, that we can divert the arrest outside of making a formal arrest. It's going to create an opportunity that's going to lead to fewer arrests in the future. So I move to the next slide for those online that are following along. So if you look at the right side, our current model has a police contact that leads to an arrest. And then our current system has a pretty significant delay, right? Like, we don't arrest someone today, they don't go to trial tomorrow and then sentenced. There's a delay that takes place. Most of the crimes that we're talking about in diversion, folks are outside of jail during that delay, right? They may go to jail for 24 to 48 hours. They're going to get released on their own recognizance. They're going to get released when they're sober. They're going to have a bail that's set that maybe just assign a promissory note, essentially. So they're going to get out before prosecution. And we're expecting that the arrest is going to lead them to now make better decisions in and of themselves before the prosecution. And we know that's actually not the case. So they're out, there's no intervention, nothing's happening between going to prosecution and having a sentence that they have and that they may or may not serve. We're talking mostly about a lot of misdemeanor crimes here. And I will just kind of put on the table for discussion, it's not just the crimes we think about in terms of trespassing or misdemeanor theft or property crimes. We're talking also about potentially assaults. I'll stay away from domestic violence assaults, so take that off the top of your head, but think about misdemeanor assaults as well. Those folks are not getting 12 months in jail. And again, I point to that delay that's pretty impactful. So they get out of jail if they do eventually get a sentence and a prosecution, which results in a sentence. They have reentry, and we know on these lower level of crimes in neighborhoods that are contributing to a high level of the crime, it is more likely than not they're going to reoffend, and the cycle starts all over again. The diversion model is a police contact, some sort of intervention. That can be a formal intervention, that can be treatment, that can be a mental health option, that can be an inpatient and outpatient, but it also is our neighborhood partners that's also involved in that diversionary process. That doesn't mean that the criminal offense is completely gone and it goes away. That option is still there. So the old model is still in play. We didn't just eliminate that. We've simply pushed that off the side to try to provide an opportunity for success. So opportunity, increased skill. And when I say increased skill, think of very, very broadly. So think of some sort of counseling service that could be provided. I'll use the word anger management, although it's probably not the appropriate word, like an anger management type of situation in response to, let's say, an assault charge. Okay, so that's an increased skill. And the idea here is if they successfully complete that project, we should see a reduction in recidivism or reoffending or crime rate in a location. And that also includes the example that I mentioned earlier with our neighborhood partners. In this case, I mentioned the Alaska Black Caucus. And I don't actually care from a police standpoint. I mean, I care, but I don't monitor what intervention our neighborhood partners do, right? That opportunity, I just need to make the connection with that neighborhood resource. And I care about whether or not they're successful in completing whatever that resource is. And if they're not, they drop out of treatment, they drop out of residential, they drop out of whatever that intervention is. We still have the old model we can go back to. We still have an arrestable charge. We can still forward that to the prosecutors and go down that model. But we want to try to venture away from that as much as we can, particularly in areas where we see high crime, lack of opportunity, crime over a consistent period of time, where we know there's the need for some increased skill or opportunity. That's the basic understanding and concept when we talk about diversion. So I know currently we get a little bit tied up into kind of the behavioral health piece, and that's definitely a piece of it, but think much, much broader when we move forward. And I'll kind of stop there just in case I have any questions real quick, because I'm going to switch gears slightly.
Yep, I have a question for Ms. Silvers.
Do you see education like GED programs and job training playing a big role in this?
So if we look at the circle on the left, we've got, unemployment, education, levels of lower socioeconomic status. All of these things play into the system. Like, if we want to step back and talk about education and the quality of education in various different areas of town, test score, like we know that education plays a pretty significant role. The quality of education plays a significant role in increased opportunities. And so not only formal education, but informal education, I think you're talking about, always plays an important role, but it can't stop there. There isn't one answer we can just invest a little bit of time and energy in and it solves the problem. So it has to go beyond just an education campaign, if you will, and include, I like to refer to as a safety net, that some of these folks that are in kind of the reoccurring cycle. And it's also important when I say reoccurring cycle, a lot of our offenders that we're talking about here, they're also victims in like legitimate crime victims as well as offenders. So they're in this kind of reoccurring loop that doesn't just only incorporate committing crimes.
I guess my question was more, do you see like the diversion piece going into a job training program or something like that as a part of it? I guess that was more my question.
I guess I haven't really thought of it from that perspective. I don't know if Steve has thoughts.
Good morning, Steve Williams with APD, the Director of Diversion Programming. I think, diversion or connecting someone to the opportunity of vocational training or formal education is certainly a possibility. I mean, really what we're talking about is that point of contact, identifying what are some of the underlying causes that may have resulted in a law enforcement response, and then seeing what the neighborhood or community programs are that are available that someone can connect to, that are appropriate, that they're interested in, that will help to address and mitigate the risks of future contact down the line.
Thank you.
I have another question. Mr. Gucker, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Case, are there tiers of offenses that won't be covered under this, or could this be any offense of any kind that would be eligible for this pretrial diversion program?
The offenses are going to be limited and outlined in the program moving forward. So kind of an easy way of thinking about it is we're going to stick mostly to misdemeanor crimes, keeping in mind that there are diversionary tools that are in play that are pre-trial, so not pre-arrest. So think of mental health court, think about getting a felony driving under the influence. That currently is a diversionary program that we have available in the state. So I won't say it completely excludes felonies because there are some opportunities there as well, but mostly we're talking about misdemeanor crimes. Mostly we're talking about non-violent, non-public threat crimes. But there's room for things like assault charges, depending upon the facts and circumstances of those particular cases.
Right. So say that you've got me, right? I don't have a criminal record, never had a criminal record. I'm walking down the street, somebody bumps into me, I take offense at it and I punch them in the face. And I get arrested for assault. And you guys can kind of say, look, I'm sorry, I've got an anger problem. Clearly, I just lost my temper. And I were to go to some sort of anger management program instead of, like prosecution or getting prosecuted or serving jail time. Do you think that's justice for the victim?
So the victim plays a role in this. Yeah, these diversion opportunities are not created in a vacuum. We could say the same thing about a business that has a theft. We're not going to eliminate the criminal justice system if you have a business, or in your example, a human victim that doesn't want to go down that road. So that's a piece of what we put into making the determination on whether or not we're going to use a diversionary technique.
Okay, so to clarify then, if the guy I punched in the face says, you know what, no, this guy's a POS, he hit me in the face for no reason, I don't want him to get anger management, or I want him to go to jail and serve time for this offense, I want him to be prosecuted, you guys would honor that and I would still be prosecuted?
Yeah, we would do yes, the answer is yes. And how we do that is they would fill out a private person's arrest form, because that's the way that misdemeanor assault works now. And so we would take that private person's arrest form, we would file the paperwork with the prosecutors, and then it gets turned over to them for prosecution like it normally would.
Okay, so okay, good. And is this pretty well known? I mean, are victims advised of their rights in this process, or is this something they have to look into to find out for themselves?
No, no, they're not going to have to look into stuff on their own. That would be pretty challenging. So the rollout of the program is to start not patrol wide. It's to start with some of our specialty units. So our impact team, our mobile intervention team, as kind of the conduit to get this started. That way we don't want to lose things in translation. We don't want to have it misapplied when we give it to 200 cops at one time. So we want to contain this information to a group of officers, so we make sure that it's getting rolled out appropriately and are not missing anything. And so what happens at the time of the arrest is those particular officers would explain to the victim, in your scenario, the human victim, that how the process works, what the diversionary opportunity is, and even if they take the diversionary opportunity, that doesn't negate an arrest later on. So if the person says, like you in this case is the offender, say, yeah, I absolutely want that diversion opportunity, the victim agrees, and that's just kind of like, quote unquote, your way to get out of an arrest for that day. And then you turn around and you don't engage in the diversionary technique or intervention a day later, we still have the arrest. And so all that's explained to the victim so that they know what their options are and what their level of involvement is in the process.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. For those of you on the phone, I'm on the incarceration data on slide number, I believe it's 6 for you on the phone. This slide, let me switch for everybody here. So what this slide represents is some of the statewide as well as the Anchorage booking into the Department of Corrections. And you can see on the right side our felony and misdemeanor breakdown, 57% of misdemeanors and 43% of felonies. I really highlight those two numbers because that's a pretty, when we look at misdemeanor crime, that's a pretty high level of in custody arrests that are going into the Department of Corrections. I think most of us are kind of familiar with the data around even when we arrest for a day and it results in 1 day or 2 days of incarceration, particularly on the front end, that sometimes can create some unintended consequences on the back end, loss of job, loss of income, loss of transportation, those sorts of things. And that 57% of misdemeanor arrests, that's where we see opportunity here to potentially not only relieve some of the impact on the criminal justice system all the way around, from officers, enforcement to prosecution to Department of Corrections, but also to create those opportunities and reduce recidivism. So that's one of the numbers that we're going to use as a measuring tool for if we impact that number once we have our diversionary program up and running. And if you look on the left side of that slide, really what that's telling you is that we have a high number of folks that are booked into just nationally and as well as in Alaska that suffer from some form of mental illness in the criminal justice system, and how that impacts their ability and services that are provided so that they may not reoffend in the future. And I put this slide a little bit later just because I wanted to focus on the overall concept before we started getting into some of the things I think a lot of people think about, which one of them is mental health and behavioral health. Next slide is again talking about our
Actually, Chief, let me interrupt you. Ms. Baldwin, did you have a question?
I do, but it might be answered in this next slide, so I'll hold it for just a
Okay.
second.
Thanks.
So next slide is people with multiple arrests that have serious mental health needs. So this is just adding on to the previous slide and breaking it down a little bit more specifically. And what we see here is, particularly if we go all the way over to the right side, percentage of folks with no health insurance, that becomes a pretty significant player. You know, I mean, we're expecting the Department of Corrections generally, I'm speaking of not just Alaska, but generally the Department of Corrections, to solve mental health challenges where there's no medical insurance and be, in a sense, the medical health provider. And what diversion does is it puts kind of that burden pre-arrest and pre-Department of Corrections. I can tell you that we have a large population within Alaska and Anchorage where people are have the availability of health insurance. There's several different avenues, and simply the pathway to get that health insurance is just too challenging for them to complete that process. One of the things that HOPE does is they actually make that connection so that people do have access to health insurance, so that then they can get not only behavioral health and mental health coverage, but just basic medical needs that need to take place. It's also one of the focus points. Well, put a little light on AFD and some of the work they're doing, but they're focusing on that the medical needs that are leading to those people using higher resources in the community. So did that answer your question, Member Baldwin, that you had?
No, so I'll ask it now. So when you have an interaction with someone who has, perpetrated some kind of misdemeanor, let's say petty theft, for example, and that person is unable to make a decision about diversion because they are incapacitated in some way, whether they let's pretend it's a mental health concern. And so they're not able to really choose diversion. What options exist in this scenario for that person to receive treatment or to be essentially required to be treated for their mental health condition? Or is that a possibility under this model?
So currently, we've already been facing those scenarios. We've had our mobile intervention team interact and kind of intercept those calls. So a patrol officer, let's say, had response to a call for service that you've described. They ask the mobile intervention team to respond and get involved with that particular call. And it's slightly different than what I've explained so far. What happens is that the team talks to the victim, because the victim plays a little bit of a role, and really kind of explains to the victim that there's mental health issue that's going on, which generally in the scenario that you're talking about, that's not a surprise to anyone based on the behavior and the conduct. And it's really an informal diversionary piece that our mobile intervention team is taking, and what they do with that individual, assuming that the victim isn't like, I absolutely want this person prosecuted. Unfortunately, that leads us to go down the traditional system. I will say that our MIT team is pretty effective in explaining kind of the scenario to our victims, and generally victims, whether they're individuals or they're representing a business, do understand that the best path, we see this over and over again, the best path to success for an individual that you describe is to go down some sort of diversionary road or alternative path. And then what the mobile intervention team does is they take that individual, and sometimes they drive to an intervention that the person needs. Sometimes it is basic medical care at a medical provider. Sometimes it is connecting to drug treatment. That stuff does not happen immediately. we just simply don't have the system in Anchorage set up where we can immediately walk them into some sort of treatment facility or inpatient services. What that requires MIT, and in many cases Hope as well, to do is to have multiple contacts with that person and outreach to providers that are available to us in Anchorage, and eventually getting them into a setting that's helpful for them. And again, that could take a day, that could take a week, that could take 2 weeks. And so it's just a long process. What we hope to build, and what we kind of already see the steps that are building throughout the community, not just within the municipality, but with our nonprofits, is that with these services that are coming online that Thea talked about, we are going to have a capacity where we can provide those opportunities much quicker than what's happening now. But it is happening. It just takes a little bit more work.
Ms. Baldwin,
Thank you,
did that
Steve.
answer your question?
I think she said
Yes,
thank you.
She said thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And just, I want to do a time check. Where I know you got quite a bit more to go.
Mr.
but,
Chair.
Yes, just a sec, Mr. Constant. Just want to give you a time check on, maybe we can do it in 5 or 10.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Constant, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Chief, I think there's one fatal flaw that you're going to have to wrestle with. And that is in the context of the DOC being the loan provider and being saddled with these services. That's the only place the state is effectively willing to pay or increasing payment for the kind of services you're talking about, in particular, the more complex behavioral health care. So what's your strategy for managing through the fact that if it's not in DOC's care, there's no real payer?
Through the chair, this is Thea Agnew-Bemben to Chair Constant. I think the types of treatment services that Steve and Chief Case are speaking about are some of our community behavioral health services, some of which are residential, and those are paid for by Medicaid, which is a federal state partnership. And it's true that not everyone is eligible for Medicaid, but a lot of people are. And it actually provides the best behavioral health coverage that we have. I mean, it's definitely true what you just shared, that DOC is the largest provider of behavioral health treatment, especially residential treatment, because you're in residence. But we do, as I mentioned earlier, have quite an increase in services. And I think some of those programs are the ones that Steve's probably been connecting with. You want to speak to that?
So while I generally agree with kind of that theory, I do see that the state levied a 25% cut to their grants and services. And so we're running into a funnel that's narrow with a project that we're intending to expand, I guess, is my concern.
Yeah, just one more thing on that. We did just meet with the Commissioner of Department of Health and the Deputy Commissioner. They're in the middle of a rate study that is identifying some pretty significant changes to behavioral health rates. And so I think they have heard the concern that the rates are really not well matched to the service in a lot of cases. And we should be seeing that results of that study and the new regulations come out within the next kind of 3 months. So I think there is some movement on that.
Yeah, I guess the rates are a whole other conversation. Anyhow, I just flagged that as a concern, that the funnel of opportunity is narrowing because they're cutting back availability of services.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Go ahead.
To go back to a little bit ago, what Member Rivera mentioned in terms of communication, kind of can't over communicate. So I show this slide frequently about the spectrum of what we do in terms of services and just kind of policing on a spectrum, as I refer to it. And in particularly, all the things that we have available to us on the department in the diversionary mold. So we have our mental health folks that are already engaged in mental health and criminal diversion with our mobile intervention team, our HOPE team. And then in a couple weeks here, we'll have our impact team that will be coming online. And just as a reminder, that's going to start with 9 employees and it'll eventually grow to 12, 6 sworn and 6 CSOs. So those are all of the members of the department that are going to be focusing on diversion as it continues to roll out. Eventually, we'll migrate this over to patrol.
And the impact team is community service officer team. Is that what that is?
Yeah, impact team is going to be, think about like when we think about community policing, like we all have this idea of the partnership between the police department and neighborhoods and communities and the interaction between the police department. That's kind of an easy way of thinking about it.
Okay.
So each one of the members of the impact team will have an area of responsibility throughout Anchorage. So you have kind of one point of contact, and they'll be focusing on reducing calls for service and reducing arrests and community problems. We're going to launch the team primarily as a start in North Mountain View, kind of as a continuing effort after the Davis Park abatement. Anchorage diversion, just real quick to go over kind of what it looks like over the kind of the history of time. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't have the presentation in front of you because it's a little bit small. But the Anchorage Mental Health Court in '98 was when that was launched. So that is a mental health diversionary post-arrest diversionary effort that's been here since 1998. APD in 2002 is when we launched our crisis intervention team. We're kind of on the leading edge of that, which we still have currently within the police department. And then mobile intervention we launched that in 2022. HOPE, the homeless outreach team, was launched in 2024. And then this year and next year is when we're putting together kind of our broader diversionary outside of what's already being done with HOPE and our mobile intervention team. And then as Thea's mentioned a couple times, we do have a host of resources that are coming online. South Central will probably be one of our top partners because they do have a lot of programming that's very broad in what they offer within the community. Just another thing that may be helpful to understand currently, our post-arrest diversion that's available in Anchorage and has been for quite some time has a capacity of about 150 between mental health court and veterans court, and then felony drug court and felony DUI court. So those things are already in existence, and that capacity of about 150.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Rivera, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to have to leave soon. So I want to get in a couple of questions that I have after reviewing the slides. So, and apologies, this is going a little bit later in the slides than you've gone. But on slide 11, you talk about diverting individuals away from the criminal justice system to community-based services equipped to address the underlying health, social, cultural, and/or economic conditions. And I guess this is sort of a follow-up to the question that member Constant asked. So I imagine that some of those services will fit under the paradigm of Medicaid reimbursement, but some of those will not. So can you speak to a little bit of who is going to bear the cost of that diversion? What does that look like?
So the majority of these are Medicaid funded, or they fall under Medicaid. Some of them fall under private insurance where they're available, because remember, we're not just focused on one, small finite group of people. So there are people that do have access to their own medical insurance. And then kind of in a third tier is, nonprofits that are providing some sort of services that are not going to incur a cost through the municipality. But that's always going to be a challenge moving forward, is how do we recoup, or how do we come up with a way that 100% of the folks that we know need to be diverted is paid for. I think if we look at, just because I had the experience of the Medicaid waiver from years ago, as we started to get that online, where we're at today and what Medicaid can pay for versus where we were at 10 years ago is night and day. And even though, as Chair Constant mentioned, we have a defunding a little bit of it, it still exists a lot better than it did 10 years ago. And in fact, 10 years ago, it didn't apply to people who were incarcerated. So now there's that increased opportunity. So I guess I'm trying to look at the glass a little bit half full.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that eternal optimism, Chief. So, yeah, I think that's something that should probably be teased out a little bit more. If it's existing programs that perhaps we fund through the alcohol tax, then I can see that working. But if we're going to be asking some of our partners to do things that they maybe aren't adequately funded for, then I think that's another conversation that we need to have. Second question that I have is I wanted to get a general sense here of how, in your opinion, is the success of a diversion program tied to the success and continued funding of our crisis response system?
They're complementary of each other. And so I'll use the units that we're starting off with and focusing in neighborhoods that we see higher level of consistent crime as to what we want to start investing in. And that investment, again, is because we want to narrow it down to the number of employees that are working in this initially. And again, to some of the community-based responses or community connection. So let's use, we have communities within Anchorage that have elders within their community or religious organizations that are tied to, and in some of these areas, making that connection between law enforcement and a potential arrest is going to lead to a reduction in certain types of criminal behavior. Costs nothing, no money exchanges hands. And then so in those areas, we can look at success as a reduction of crime in those areas directly tied to this in data collection. So in a year when I'm sitting here, I can focus on those areas and then we can talk about whether or not we're successful. So that in and of itself is separate of kind of that behavioral health response. But the behavioral health response also is kind of a second and complementary. I think between the Anchorage Police Department, the Health Department, the Fire Department, Parks and Recs that also are playing a role in this right now. We have kind of a very broad spectrum of responses throughout the municipality that is kind of help funneling, and so that piece of it is gonna consistently contribute to that. But going back to your previous question, like there is a ceiling on some of those services, but right now we're simply not taking. I mean, today we're taking better advantage of those opportunities than we were, let's say 3 years ago. But in the future, with just the direction that we're going, we're going to continue to kind of take advantage of some of those opportunities. I mean, right now, our 150 people that can be in our current diversion area options that are post-arrest, it's not full. Like there's empty space that's not being utilized already. And so what we're going to find over the next couple of years is we're going to take advantage of every single bed, if you will, that's available that we're just not right now. Doing a better job today, but we're continuing to kind of grow that capacity and take advantage of that.
Thanks. And I think we're just about out of time. So if you want to summarize, if you can, that would be great.
I'm just going to jump ahead to the last slide, number 13, and talk about the goals. And this is about public safety. This is about finding an appropriate response to really gain effectiveness. And we can look historically over time at some of the responses within the criminal justice system, particularly with law enforcement, that has not reduced crime and recidivism. And diversion, and particularly focusing on some of those areas where there is a lack of opportunity, is where this project and this effort is really going to get a return on the investment with a very, very low risk of failure.
Thanks. Well, thanks for the presentation. I assume that this is giving us a lot of information in terms of a future ask, and that this is something that the city wants to invest in more. So I would anticipate more coming. Is that correct? Yes.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we continuously have conversations about what funding needs to look like to make this better and more effective. And I say for the first year or 2 years,
Mhm.
it's taking advantage of what's already there.
Okay.
And so, eventually, yeah, there's probably going to be some ask down the road, but we don't know what that looks like because we're not taking advantage of the opportunities that are even there.
William?
Yeah, and if I can just add one last thing for the members of the assembly and those online to be thinking about is to be thinking about this also as early intervention. So be thinking about crime 5, 10 years out. That if there are opportunities to divert early on with minimal, where an individual has had minimal contact with law enforcement and get them connected, that has the potential of increasing public safety down the line. So I encourage people to think about the individuals that they may not be thinking about off the top of their heads as we're having this conversation this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Before I let you go, Chief Case, there was a note on the agenda, just as an update. We said we're going to come back and make sure we're giving updates on the AO 2025-74 S2, the camping ordinance. Is there an update on that in terms of how many arrests, how many citations have been given at this point?
I want to say it's 1. I may have missed 1 or 2 in
Okay.
there, but it's very low numbers are arrests
One
right now.
arrest.
Yeah, and so that is working out well. I think we anticipated how it was going to be enforced on the patrol side as well as with CAP. That's has been working with the homeless population right now. We are entering into here the next month or so where we're going to have to start thinking about winter. Not that I want to think about that, but unfortunately that's where we're at. And ensuring that, we kind of line up going into winter appropriately with enforcement of that ordinance and places to go with that ordinance in mind. And so we're working through all that.
Thanks. Thanks, right. We'll continue to bring it back at this meeting and make sure we're getting updates on how that's going. Thanks very much for your time today. Okay, we're gonna move quickly into if Anchorage Fire Department and the Office of Emergency Management with you both would come up. I think you both have brief updates for us. All right, Chief Schrage, if you want to get us started, I think we were just looking for a quick update on the on AO 2025-61, the fire ordinance, and how that's going.
Yes, good morning. Happy to do so. We did review the number of outdoor fires that we've experienced in the context of AO 2025-61. And first, I want to define what outdoor fires is. Outdoor fires includes all types of fires that are outdoors, attended and supervised with somebody on scene. Dumpster fires, mulch and vegetation fires, and a few unknown fires. And what I can report to you is that through August 31st of 2024, we had 637 outdoor fires. So from the beginning of the year to roughly this time last year, 637 fires. During the same period, year to date, this year, 2025, 1,083. So a 70% increase in the number of outdoor fires. This indicates that outside fires have become our leading fire call type. Outdoor fires have surpassed structure fires, vehicle fires, and all other types of fire calls. In the context of AO 25-61, I looked at the number of outdoor fires in May and July, the 2 shoulder months surrounding the implementation date, in 2024 and in 2025. In 2024, in May, we had 120 outdoor fires. In July of 2024, 109. During the same 2 months in 2025, May, 159, which is up 33% over the same month in 24. And in July, 257 compared to July of the previous year, an increase of 36%. So what I conclude from this is that outdoor fires generally have increased. And 2025-61 has not yet had any apparent deterrent effect that we can detect. In fact, it may have increased the number of calls just due to the added awareness among members of the public. In terms of process, the fire department on location will request APD if A, they determine it's an unauthorized fire as defined in the ordinance, and B, if there are subjects on location. We don't call APD if there's nobody there that could be held responsible for the fire. And APD has been reliable in responding when we request their help. And then finally, in addition, our fire and arson investigators have observed an increase in APD citations for unauthorized burning. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I have a question from Ms. Silvers.
I think my question is probably more for APD. I wonder if Chief Case would be willing to come back and answer. How many citations have you had for these outdoor fires? Or how many have you issued?
It's a low number. I believe it may be, I mean, even zero. It's a very, very low number. And I think the challenge with this particular ordinance, which we talked about heavily going into this, is the calls coming in, AFD getting the call, their response, APD's response, making sure that all of them are coordinated at the same time. Our response to those type of fires, once we get notified, is priority in the stack. And keeping in mind that although fires are a problem, like we all recognize that, when the fire department's on scene and putting out the fire, the safety risk, immediate safety risk is gone. And so, if officers are on a person crime call, that doesn't bump priority over a call that, there's an intervention. So the priority of APD's response to fires remains the same. We didn't change that in our call stack. And so that has always kind of been the limiting factor that we've talked about. That will not, once the ordinance is passed, it's not immediately going to result in, a lot of arrests, and we shouldn't have that expectation.
Has any private property been damaged by any of these fires? Fences, sheds? Have any houses been threatened or outside walls of houses?
Yes, this is Chief Schrage through the chair. Yes, there has been private property damaged by fire.
I guess my other question is, it seems like people aren't really taking the ordinance seriously. And it seems like part of that could be because of the lack of enforcement of it. And I know, APD isn't going to want to be out there enforcing the fire ordinance all the time. But if you look at speeding, APD isn't always out there looking for speeding, but sometimes you have enforcement events. Where you have some officers go out on the bridge and they do an enforcement event, they do a speed trap. Can APD do enforcement events on these outdoor fires to help people take the ordinance more seriously and act probably more as a deterrent?
I definitely understand your question, Member Silvers, and kind of what you're getting at. That's a little bit easier said than done, right? I mean, you're talking about how do we have patrol officers do a proactive enforcement really what you're kind of talking about is camps, right? Like if we were to say, officers, I need to direct your attention so that you potentially can be proactive in citing. We're talking about camps and sending officers around to camps to enforce, which again is possible, but I think that if I go back to the work session and the many conversations that we had pre-passing of this legislation, that was one of the concerns that I think a lot of the members had, is how we're potentially this is going to be disproportionately applied. I think that was one of the fears. So we haven't done that, kind of knowing that was a history of some of the conversations that we had. It can be done. I think that's probably maybe a little bit of a broader conversation.
I guess I just have concerns because a lot of these fires, people are blowing up propane tanks. These are not fires where people are warming, their fingers and toes. These are fires where people are not taking this ordinance seriously, and they're partying, having bonfires or whatever, blowing up propane tanks, burning structures, and, private property has been damaged. And it's been not a very dry year. And so we got lucky there. But in a drier year, the results of this could be devastating. And so I think some kind of deterrence probably needs to happen at some point. So I guess that's a conversation we can go down that road further
Yeah, and if I may
another time.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond, I think one of the conversation I'll probably have with Chief Schrage, not that I expect the fire department to do enforcement, but I know they have a lot more data on where these fires are occurring. And so that maybe be able to hone us in a little bit going into that conversation. So we're a little more educated.
Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks both for being here. Officer of Emergency Management, update.
Hi, today, my name is Amanda Loach. I'm with the Office of Emergency Management. Today, I would like to talk to you about the 2025 Great Shakeout, which is an earthquake drill. Why this matters? Well, earthquakes are a no-notice event. We don't get a call or a warning before they occur. First time people practice how they will respond. First, with a drop cover and hold on should not be when the ground is shaking. This is an annual chance to work together to build muscle memory across our community.
Excuse me, Chair. I think her mic might have just cut out. It's a little bit hard to hear now on the phone.
Hi, can you hear me better?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. This is our annual chance to work together and build muscle memory across the community about how we will respond at work, at school, or at home. Leaders like us are the ones who make that practice possible. In 2024, over 40 million people took the opportunity worldwide to register and participate in Shakeout. This year, we encourage everyone to practice on October the 16th, but the event can be completed any day and any place. It can only take a minute or it can take more time. We already know Anchorage sits on active earthquake faults. Another 1964 earthquake here could mean extended power outages, roads blocked, and lives at risk. But if every muni department, school, and every place of worship or business knows exactly what to do, we will save lives, speed recovery, and show our residents and visitors that safety and preparedness is empowering and its benefits radiate to those around us. Dollar for dollar, this is a 13-to-1 investment in public safety. This is also known as safety, prevention, protective actions, or guardianship. The Shakeout campaign momentum is strongest when we take action and model behavior. When our teams lead and participate by a simple drop, cover, and hold on, a plan of a drill of a building evacuation, update an emergency family or business household plan, or have a discussion about decision-making or business continuity, the people around us will be inspired to follow. Everyone can have an important role by leading by example. We can conduct drills at home, in shops, and staff meetings, sharing Shakeout messages on our social media channels, and encouraging partner organizations to do the same. So how are we doing so far? Good news. As of this morning, over 54,000 Anchorage participants and organizations are registered at the shakeout.org website. Anchorage schools, childcare centers, businesses, and healthcare organizations are stepping up already. We still need to reach faith-based communities, hospitality sector, neighborhood groups and programs, and youth and other organizations to get registered as well. We need to commit to participation in the Shakeout drill. Encourage teams to register online at shakeout.org so preparedness efforts are counted. We can use our individual influence to spread the word, mention it at council meetings and other community meetings, advertise the event by something as simple as putting the link to shakeout.org on our website or on our email signature block and share it on social media. Shakeout is about more than a drill. It's about building a culture of preparedness and safety together. If our community sees and hears that each of us are inspired to practice for the next earthquake, they will want to practice too. And that can make all the difference when the shaking starts. There are tons of prepackaged resources for the drill at shakeout.org. Handouts, multimedia materials, and visuals, workbooks for all sectors, and videos that are all ready for us to use online. We can be leaders in the community. Shakeout is a fun and easy way to do that. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for your update, and your presentation. I don't have any questions for you today. All right, thanks. Why doesn't the ACE folks want you to come on up? And Chief Shoggy, would you mind emailing the data that you shared with me today? I'll be happy to share it with the rest of the assembly. But if you wouldn't mind emailing it to me, that'd be great. Thanks. Welcome, welcome. Hi, good to see you guys. When you're ready, go ahead and share your name for the record, and you can begin your presentation.
Trevor Stores, I'm the chair of the Anchorage Child Care and Early Education Fund.
Khalil Within, I'm a board member.
Austin Quinn Davidson, interim executive director.
Remind me how much time we have, because I know we're a bit late. About 20 minutes. I'll go fast and go through this. If we can go to the next slide, please. Today, we just wanted to provide a quick and brief update of what's been happening on the ACE Fund board and the great work that everyone has been doing. So we'll be talking about the implementation and the different programs, and also talk about what's next, because we're coming on to just shy of a year of the board actually forming and moving forward. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick list of our board members. We're fully seated, so we have a total of 9 members from a variety of backgrounds, meeting the requirements of the ordinance, and just bringing a variety of perspective into the room. Next slide, please. So what's been happening over the last few months, the big focus for the past 11 months is just getting the funding out the door. And again, want to really recognize Austin to my right, all the board members, and many of the Muni staff. None of this could have been done without everybody's support and real focus, and working through some of the challenges that we sometimes create as we're trying to get programs out and form them the way we want within a governmental system. So always facing some challenges, but it's actually been really good and a great learning process. We've also just started, we'll actually be meeting this week, next week, I think tomorrow, it is tomorrow, our strategic planning process. So, which will inform code required investment strategies. So really looking at what is the role of the board, and how can we be looking at really uplifting early childhood education and childcare in our community, and not just in the sense of what we can do with the money, but what we can do as a community. So we're really excited. As well as, which you'll be seeing soon, we worked on the 26 budget, our first as a board, working through that budget process. And that will be presented to the mayor, and then the assembly will be seeing it probably by October when the mayor submits. And then, of course, we've been holding our monthly meetings, engagement with the public, responded to inquiries, and just relations out in the community. Next slide, please. So let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk about where the dollars are going. One of the first things that was recommended by not just the board, but if you remember before the board came together, we had the implementation team. They suggested looking at early educator childcare subsidies. This is for individuals that are working in Anchorage. Kids are in childcare here, and it provides them a subsidy to cover costs of childcare, and making it able for them to go to work because they have childcare and can afford it. So again, if you think about a childcare worker, they are filling the role. They can cover up to, if they're working with children, 10 children. If their child is taking up one of those slots, they're serving 9 more. Keeping them at home with their child, they're only able to support 1 child. So it really does allow us to expand. So it retains that workforce. It ensures children have quality care. It actually creates those more spots, as I talked about, and it benefits childcare businesses by actually creating that benefit. Next slide, please. So what is the current impact? And of course, all of this stuff takes time. we started putting this together. They went out. First, we had to identify who would manage this because we weren't managing it internal into the municipality, and then design it and put it out. It has just gone out. At this point, we have 76 families enrolled, which is 119 kids whose care is now paid for. This is a tremendous step forward. It is a rolling application. This is brand new. So we were not sure how many families we actually would have apply, how many needed. We don't have that kind of data. Of course, data is something we'll be talking about in a strategic plan, but this is a great start, recognizing that we still have the money, so we have a rolling application versus just apply and be done. So 76 workers are receiving the benefit, and it is helping not just those 119 kids, but actually hundreds more because they're able to attend work and so forth. Next slide. For workers who don't receive benefits through the Child Care Assistance Program, that is a requirement. You apply and get denied. Again, we want to braid our funding, so it's just not to give. There is child care assistance out there through the state. So if they don't, this program currently pays 75%. Those who do receive that benefit, it's an additional $200. And again, we started conservative with folks. And the reason is because, again, we weren't sure how many families would be applying, and we didn't want to run out of money and or be able to continue. So until we really get a grasp of a good year under us, we're being conservative, but we see the potential of this growing. So we're excited for that. Next slide. So first payments actually went out last week. So this is great. The payments are made monthly. Those receiving the benefits must actually participate in data collection. So we are evaluating this. This is not going to be just giving out dollars. We actually want to know the impact. Is it helping or not? And how's it not just helping the individual and the family, but the sector and or specifically the childcare business that's receiving this. So we'll be collecting this. We'll get our first initial information here in the fall and hopefully have results. And we're going to continue this. Again, it's just the beginning. Initial survey isn't going to be definitive, but it will tell us at least what adjustments do we need to make as we are moving this forward. And just to remind again, the Assembly, this is based off of examples that have been done in other states. This is not something we created out of our own thought process. We've been seeing this being successful, like in Kentucky and a few other states. And so we have adopted it here. Next slide, please. The next is operational assistance. These are the stimulus, 2.4 million. Again, this went to Thread Alaska to administer. Those have just started, and it provides flexible one-time operational payments. And checks actually started being mailed out 2 weeks ago, and we expect it to be done here by mid-September. And the board members that were a part of this, as well as Thread, actually created a whole formula that determined the dollars. Next slide, please.
Mr. George, can you just share in the previous investment, who is managing the early educator care services?
Oh, thank you. It's Alaska Family Services.
Thank you.
You bet.
Can I add something about
Please.
that? So Alaska Family Services conveniently manages the state child care assistance program in Anchorage. And so they have a really good sense of applicants and who's receiving what, and which makes their operation of our program a little more efficient than it might otherwise be.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. So payments are based on the type of organization. This isn't the exact formula because that's a little more complicated, but we wanted to recognize there's different sizes, different types of centers. There are camps, there's different aspects, as well as license exempt non-relative providers, the smaller home entities. So trying to create an equitable way of distributing these dollars and meeting the need. So we tried to create it. Is it a perfect formula? Probably not. Nothing ever is. But again, first round going out, we will assess. We're going to be collecting data and looking at the impact, as well as getting feedback on the dollars. But you know, one of the things that we did in the application process, we asked folks with these stimulus grants, like, what what amount of funding would you need to ensure your doors just don't close? That's the idea of these stimulus, but we also recognize 2.4 million is just not enough. And what they said is the average response was coming out to be just about $64,000 is what's needed. No one, as you can see, is getting that amount. So one of the struggles, and I know people like stimulus, we're just giving money. This is how underfunded childcare centers are. This is not a stimulus like, oh, here's do a little more. This is literally without these types of funds, they have a hard time operating and being able to keep their doors open. And we're seeing folks close. And I know the Department of Health over time has shared about licensing and the numbers that open and the numbers that close. We see them close sometimes faster than they open. So we know what these stimulus dollars do, and it's trusting them to use them to keep their doors open and promote staff and providing the services. Next slide, please. So we're hearing hands down, it's the most helpful to the sector. Thread distributes these same as they did COVID-19. That's one of the reasons why they were selected. They have that experience and the knowledge. And then from their experience and the recipients within the Muni said from the COVID-19, you can see how was it helpful? It stabilized their program, 97%. These have a direct impact. Avoid closing, 93. You can see that these have a tremendous impact. Folks can read on their own, but you can see the impact that it has and the importance of it. Thread also designed a survey, like I mentioned, and we will be collecting data and finding out the impact. And again, all of these surveys are helping us not just specifically with the funding source, but overall funding, how best to use those dollars and have the impact.
Just a quick question.
Please.
You'll probably get this through the survey, but it is. I am really going to be curious about what they decided to specifically use it for, and how that varies organization to organization.
I want to jump in on that. I think in the survey from the similar but earlier funding, they determined that the vast majority was on wages and regular services, and then a small portion was to capital. So in the previous experience, that was one of the things that we learned, but I think it's a good idea to make sure we gather that in the next round.
Next slide, please.
I have a question for you, Ms. Balwinde.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, with the operational assistance stimulus, I'm curious how many total operators applied for this stimulus and received it?
Austin, you remember the number? I know it was over 200, like
Yeah.
212.
It's around 200, and there are just under 200 licensed either centers or family and home care entities in Anchorage. And so it was a little over 200 because we included camps and exempt non-relative providers in that allowed or eligible list.
Okay, wow, thank you.
Absolutely. And we will definitely, once everything is out and finalized, we will actually create kind of like one pagers on each one of these that will really get into some of the details as we gather those. The last bucket was pilot projects and capital funding. These are that flexible financial assistance that drives innovation, increases access to quality, you can read, and includes eligibility for capital projects. It was seen, is there an idea out there people wanted to look at to maybe strengthen as well as just the capital, the stimulus dollars, mostly, as we know, and as mentioned, goes to the employees, but we also need good structures, as well as maybe there's some assistance someone needs to either open up and or to be able to expand and provide services. Next slide, please. So we put together an RFGP. You see the team, again, really appreciate everybody putting this together, as well as an evaluation committee. It includes folks from the board, the municipality, as well as we brought in a representative from Rasmussen Foundation, who's been looking at childcare and how they can be involved. And again, this is a way of building expertise outside in those relationships and potential braiding of funding. So we released it. It ran for 6 weeks. We received 48 proposals, totaling over 5 million, and we had 2. So a lot higher. Of those, the evaluation committee recommended funding 13 capital and 7 pilot projects. Now, one of the challenges was we recognized, especially with pilot projects, was we also had to look at what could actually be implemented. We did this in beginning of summer and getting those dollars out and people are able to use them. They have to be used end of December. So again, we wanted to invest in projects that could actually achieve that. But we also recognize that some projects may never have applied because they actually need the full 12 months. Again, that's why we will be even starting earlier once you all approve the budget and being prepped and ready. Next slide, please. So what was included? A lot of repurposing, utilizing ASD classrooms to rent-free spaces for community-based childcare. That is part of the ordinance. That is something we will be actually exploring even more in our strategic planning, is what is that relationship and how do we use that available space with ASD to potentially provide space, free space or low-cost space, again, for our childcare programs. A lot was in teacher training, uplifting the industry, program to transform business to worker-led childcare, feasibility study on employer-supported childcare cost sharing. There was a lot to playground upgrades, multiple renovation projects to add capacity, and many others. And what this also did for us, it gave us ideas. So there was actually a lot around playground upgrades when we looked at them. And one of the things we're like, oh, is there a way to potentially partner? So some of this is capital. Is there ways of maybe approaching Rasmussen to see if there's some we put in, they put in? But also, it was weird. My Facebook must have been listening, and I was getting a lot of playground equipment grant opportunities through the companies. I'm glad Facebook doesn't listen when the phone is closed, but I was getting those and passing them to us and going, these are things we should explore. Again, how do we braid the dollars and how do we do this? Potentially, could we identify playgrounds, do it, have everybody use one company? Could we get cost savings? Like, what is the way of pooling? So again, it's not just about us putting out the dollars. We're looking at really, how do I always, as I say, interlock arms as a group? And then lastly, entities must again spend the money by the end. So the lessons learned and the next steps: online application. BidXpress, not always user-friendly, has been a challenge. And actually, a lot of people didn't even know that's where you need to go. A lot of people do not know BidXpress is now potentially the muni's way of applying for dollars. We have to explore that. More non-traditional applications than is typical for RFP process that we receive, and really actually form some great relationships with that. We need to add
Trevor,
technical.
can I add something there?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we worked with Kim in the purchasing department, who is really wonderful. And she said that they had more questions, which is a struggle for purchasing because they're not allowed to answer all the things, right? Or help people put the applications together. People who were not native English speakers, people who had never applied for a Muni grant, but were really interested in how this could work. So I think it was a really good demonstration that the ACE funding has the opportunity to touch a lot of different populations, because this is a service that is so deep in our community and different parts of the community, but also highlighted, as Trevor's going to talk about, making sure that this process is really accessible to people from different backgrounds, different language abilities, different technical abilities. Kim said it was sort of hard to watch sometimes, people just not knowing how to even apply. And we got a lot of applications without budgets, even though the budget was supposed to be there. So anyway, Trevor can talk about what we're thinking about for next time, but we learned a lot about this process.
Well, I think you just hit it. It's about technical support, translation, and just figuring out how do we and can we change the Muni process and streamline it, and or we recognize that we're a small cog in a much larger system. So what do we need to do to shore that up and make sure that it is accessible and we're reaching, which is like the Muni insurance is a challenge. Like, how do we address that? And of course, working with the Muni team, Bill is part of it, and that's been a great partnership and really looking at it. And of course, there's just a greater need, but there's some great ideas and we're looking at how do we expand that. And of course, we're going to be surveying and getting feedback. So there would be more to come, but it's definitely worth continuing this program at the moment. Austin?
Yeah, unless there's any objection, I'm going to extend the meeting by 10 minutes, just to give us a little bit more time. Thanks.
I was just going to add a thanks to Tamaya and Val in the health department, and Kim too for her leadership around this and generous support with her staff time and herself. Tamaya is out on parental leave, and Val stepped in immediately and has completed, doing 20 contracts that you didn't expect to work on is kind of a lot of work, and she's just jumped right in. But we'll note that almost every contract has been slower than it could have otherwise been based on insurance requirements that many of the entities don't maintain the type of insurance that we're asking for. And so it sounds like that's a common issue with AHD and with grants and contracts. And so, yeah, we've been talking with Bill about, what does that look like? And why do we have to go through a month or two of them going back and forth and then finally asking for a waiver and then risk approving a waiver? But in the meantime, you've lost 2 months of work. And are there insurance requirements we could reduce or bring down either for this or muni-wide? Anyway, I know it's been an ongoing conversation with Director Rash and Bill as well. So
Next slide, please. So what's next? I mentioned the strategic planning. We're working through that process. We have invited members from the assembly, as well as our board, as well as probably almost 20 community members in that area to be a part of the room. Again, goal of the board is to be fully transparent and involve the community. We're not doing this in a silo, and this is one of the ways we're demonstrating that. Budget, that's coming out, shared information. Just evaluate how to improve existing programs and implement them. And Austin, as much as everybody loves her, she's our interim executive director. We kept her on for a year and has been tremendous in leading all this work. Really want to recognize, I don't think we'd even be close to where we are if it wasn't just for her and her relationships and then partnership with the Muni. But we do need somebody local and connected, and we started that process. And it was just actually posted, I think, late last week or the beginning of this week. So we are looking for our full-time executive director, which will have a crossover with Austin for several months to make sure all of her knowledge is passed on. So we're excited about that. Next slide.
can I add one more thing?
Please.
So the intent of today's meeting was to run through 2025 programs and sort of a general status update and where we are. And then we've also scheduled a work session for a full hour or 50 minutes, I can't remember, that we're going to talk about the budget. So you received the budget last week that we put together. Obviously, the mayor and her team will put out the budget October 1. So at that point, we'll have a conversation about, what questions you guys have about our process. And then also we'll use part of that time to go over the draft strategic plan that the board, a subset of the board will be working on, and that with the facilitator, and that will be presented at the board meeting on the 2nd. So both of those things we'll have a chance to talk through in more detail in about a month.
And just to add about the upcoming budget, the providers expressed, strong encouragement for continuity of some of the programs, especially for the pilot programs, so that we could actually have the potential to see greater results if they apply for additional funding. So the board took that into consideration with maintaining, similar pots of funds for several of the buckets that Trevor went over, as well as looking at, how to do some new programs that are maybe smaller, but at least to get started, balancing the continuity. So that was major feedback we heard from the community that went into the budget that we'll talk about next month.
And just to piggyback on that, we've really tried to, this is a new program. So it's like open arms to the community, the sector. What you guys know your work best? What do you think we should be doing? What questions do you think we should be asking? And, we did months, probably we started the budget conversation in March, and then every month would have more discussions and invite other people to come talk with us, and presented a draft and then went over it with the public. And so we engaged the public I think, and I hope a lot. I got a lot of emails from people. I had offline conversations with different operators, from Girdwood on up. And then we also did a public survey that we got, I think 34 responses, which is pretty good. I mean, and because a lot of it was from the sector itself and from businesses saying what they thought made sense. So anyway, we had a lot of information to work with, and that budget was all shaped by and informed by that information.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I don't see any questions. I just one thing that's standing out to me, and you alluded to it, is during the strategic planning process and your update with the assembly, would love to hear more about not only what the community is wanting and needing and how that's informing your work, but also just the internal processes and systems and relationship with the health department, and thinking about just the long-term sustainability of this, and that it is in many ways a new way of doing things, a new way of really targeting funding towards a sector, and how it's led and how it's managed. And so I think in terms of really thinking about what's working and what may not be working down the road, because I would anticipate at some point there may be even some code changes that may be necessary as you're learning about how to build this in a way that's really sustainable and weathers changes, for instance, changes in administrations, changes in all kinds of things, but allows it to be something that is consistent and impactful. So that's another thing to just continue to keep in mind, is that if there are down the road from the Assembly's perspective, there are things that we can do to adjust it based on the things you're learning. That would be really informative and helpful. Response to that?
Yeah. And Kim might have thoughts too. We should have invited her, because really she's been the sort of fourth, it's been like Bill and his operation and Nolan, and then the board and me, and then Kim and her team. And so I don't know if you have thoughts or want to share anything, Kim, but as she's coming up, I would just say that one thing we noticed is at the beginning, right, this program just started. Like, wait, who's going to do all the contracts? Who's going to do the RFP? Like, I didn't know how to do an RFP or an RFGP. And so she immediately just said, here's Tamaya, she'll help you. And she added that on top of everything else. But what we realized is if we're going to have someone managing these, right, I'm reviewing narrative reports, but people have to review invoices and issue payments and all of these things and follow, contract requirements. They can't just do that on top of everything else. And so there is now funding from the administration, part of the ACE fund, to support a position at AHD. So we could talk about that.
Yeah. Kimberly Rash, Anchorage Health Department. So one of the things we, as Austin just mentioned, noticed early on is that one of the great things of this, this taxation and that the way the budget was set up is that it did have that administrative bucket. And so that it did allow for us to go ahead and hire an individual. So we are currently in the process of hiring grants and contracts administrator so that it can support the executive director and support the board. And so it will be that kind of like the third leg of the stool here of this relationship. And I think that that is one of the pieces that we've kind of worked through is how does this relationship work and how is it going to evolve? With our other alcohol tax, it's all in the health department. So working through how it works with working with the administration and working with the board has been a great opportunity, and it has been a learning experience. And I think that the way that we're setting it up is going to be a lot more successful. And I think that we can definitely get the contracts and the grants out a little bit quicker and get those funds out. But that was one of the biggest hurdles that we had is, what do we do with all of this and who has the capacity to do it within the health department?
Thanks, I appreciate that, and I think again, it's because it's a newish model, and the balance between independence and investing and connecting with the administration and with the community is this really important balance for us to explore. So thanks again for your time today. Thanks for all your hard work. I'm really excited to see how far this has gone and excited to see how it will continue into the future. So I don't see any other questions for you guys. So thanks for being here today. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And I see we may have one person who wants to speak. Why don't you come on up? We'll give you three minutes, and then we'll adjourn our meeting for today. All right, share your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, Jamie Lopez, East Anchorage. Good morning, Mr. President, Ms. Silvers. So mostly unprepared remarks. I intended to be here at the beginning and then obviously missed it all. So there's a lot of the presentation I missed. I tried to catch some of it, whether it was, diversion program, some discussion of that, and some of the things going on. My concern, and I obviously trying to fit it in 3 minutes, is that numbers drive policy decisions. And so typically if you have bad data coming in, bad data can lead to bad decisions. And it doesn't just always mean that, somebody is making a bad decision right away, but you need to have, a good source of information so that you can make the best judgment possible. And so essentially what happened with coalition numbers was I started telling people what they meant. Whether it was the numbers between 30 days, of whatever the day that they had a database snapshot, or 30 and 90 days, or once they hit, a hard 90 that they stopped tracking because they have no idea where they've gone. And then there are numbers beyond that. And so the numbers were high, and then they've gone back to obscuring the data by not listing heads and beds. It's just 100% utilization. That needs to be updated. And then the 30 to 90 set to go inactive is gone. And so you sort of have a lot of different things in flux right now. So you have bad data, data being hidden. You have AO 2025-74S2, which is essentially displacing people endlessly for the sake of optics. It's not really helping people and stabilizing people. You have the ERA funds, which are about to run out very shortly on September 30th. And I believe in the last meeting, it was said that 276 of the people that were outside got those funds. And typically these are people that have had any number of problems outside. They haven't gotten to a point of stability. And so chances are those people, are the vast majority of them, are probably going to right back out once they cannot afford to pay rent because they haven't dealt with the underlying issues. And then on top of this, you had apparently 532 beds last year of total shelter paid by the muni. You had 200 CWS. You had 200 for Henning. I believe the total was 100 Alex Hotel, 68 Merrill Field Inn, 32 Henry House. Then you had 132 from MASH at the Alex Hotel as well. And so now you've essentially reduced that from 532 beds down to 300, where you have 100 at CWS F56, 100 F of Fantasies on 5th, Linda's Place. And then you also have 100 at the Alex Hotel. And during the HPRS meeting last week, Ms. Rash, I asked her, do you intend to add any additional beds? Is the administration going to? She said no. And so this is going to be a whirlwind where you're going to have people sure as frostbite. And I don't know how many popsicles it's going to take before people realize that they need to have more beds, but winter is coming, guys. And I'm hoping, please try to have a support system in place for the people that are out there, or add more beds. Can't cover it all. All right, thank you.
Thanks for being here today. Thanks for your comments.
Yep.
Seeing no other comments, this meeting is adjourned.